This is your Thursday daily delivery. I'm Michael Rand. Hope you're doing well out there today. Good show coming up here for you. Chris Hine covers the Timberwolves for the Star Tribune. Will be with me in just a few minutes here to talk through kind of the upcoming draft. We are 1 week out from the NBA draft. The Wolves have 4 picks in that draft, including number 19 overall. Not likely they probably keep all 4 picks. I don't think they'd have, roster spots for 4 rookies, but you can see them mixing and matching, maybe finding a trade, finding someone that's they can make a European or overseas player they could stash for a while who wouldn't come over quite yet, things like that. So it'll be interesting. It's just after having no picks last year in the draft, it'll be a fun night at the very least to see who the Wolves wind up with. So Chris and I will get into a little bit of kind of that process, Tim Connelly and what his decision-making process looks like, D'Angelo Russell, his situation, how that fits into everything. And we talked a little bit of NBA Finals too, so that will be coming up here in just a few minutes. And then I'll take a longer look at maybe some of the players the Wolves should take at number 19 or could take at the very least. NBA game finals resume tonight. I'll talk about that a little bit. Golden State could clinch another championship tonight. A season I could not necessarily have envisioned. Didn't think they had another championship in them necessarily, although I did, at the start of these playoffs, I did pick them to win it all, just a hunch, but that was more of a hunch than it was a practical thought. Or maybe it was looking at the West and just being like, the West is kind of wide open, but they are taking advantage of that and playing very good basketball, so that resumes tonight. Colorado started off the NHL Finals with a overtime win over Tampa Bay on Wednesday night as well, so we can talk about that a little bit. But first, what did I miss? Twins get a series win over the Mariners. Same score as Tuesday. Better result, though, 5-0. This time the Twins win by that score. An afternoon game for the Twins in this one, so that was finished up relatively good fashion. I want to talk about Sonny Gray. Comes right back off the injured list. Second time he'd been on the injured list this season, so he's only made 8 starts this season, but those 8 starts have been awfully good. You got to keep him healthy. In 8 starts, he's pitched 38 2/3 innings. It's early in the year, kind of like a lot of different pitchers. He wasn't going very deep into games, but has not allowed more than 2 runs in any of his 8 starts, and his last 4 in particular have been very good. He had the 3 right before the injured list trip where he pitched a combined 19 innings and gave up just 3 runs, and then comes back off the injured list pitching for the first time in 2.5 weeks against Seattle. 5 innings, 3 runs. 5 innings, 3 hits, no runs, no walks, 3 strikeouts. So 2.09 ERA for the season. 38 2/3 innings, 10 walks, 42 strikeouts, just 26 hits allowed, giving up less than a base runner per 9 innings. Aside from the health, which you knew could be an issue, with a couple different things popping up for him so far this season, aside from that, he's been everything you could have wanted him to be when the Twins made that trade before the season with the Reds giving up number 1 first round pick Chase Petty in the deal. Tough to give up a prospect of that caliber, but you see Sonny Gray pitch, and now you realize why it might have been worth it. This guy has been an anchor at the top of the rotation again when he has been healthy, and he's gives the Twins kind of a different look. I'm trying to imagine, they've had to live life without him for stretches this season just because of the injuries, because of how things have gone for him this season. But it's hard to imagine them having much success overall this year if they did not have Sonny Gray in this rotation. And he's signed for this year, $10 million. $12 million next season as well. So they've got him for another year if that all works out. So that to me was a pretty good deal to get him for 2 years in here at those rates. Again, not out of this world money, and he has had a history of injury, but that's pretty good value for someone who can pitch that well at the top of the rotation. And like Phil Miller noted in his game story, Star Tribune, StarTribune.com, we had a good conversation with Phil earlier this week where he kind of hinted that Joe Ryan and Sonny Gray should be coming back in this series, and indeed both of them did come back in the series. Joe Ryan not as effective. He took the loss in that 5-0 loss on Tuesday. But if you think about how well the Twins were able to kind of weather the storm, especially in that stretch against the AL East where they didn't have Sonny Gray, didn't have Joe Ryan, didn't have Bailey Ober, and they were able to still go 5-4 against the Jays, Yankees, and Rays. And now, schedule, I would say, easing up because they do have some important games coming up here. They've still got a lot of games against Cleveland and Chicago that will tell you a lot about how the division race is going to go. But, they got through that gauntlet, and now they're getting some of their good proven pitching back, and that's going to make a huge difference. So that to me tells me a lot about kind of where this team is at right now. Rocco Baldelli talked about that. I'm going to read his quote. We've been playing pretty well against some good teams, Baldelli said, but we're a different team at our best when those guys are taking the hill and giving starts like Sonny did today. As we build them up, they'll be even stronger and even better in their starts to come. So, there you have it. It's, if you're looking for reasons for optimism for the Twins, aside from just the fact that they are a first-place team still, just look at the rotation they're bringing back now. They've been pretty good all year in kind of getting through things. Imagine what they could do if they were all reasonably healthy at the same time. Maybe we're going to find that out soon, and maybe you're going to like the results.
Take a playcation to Mystic Lake for 24/7 gaming, fun restaurants and bars, and luxurious hotel rooms. And join Club M to bask in the rewards. Follow the lights to Mystic Lake, where every day is play day.
I would like to welcome back Chris Hine to Daily Delivery. Of course, covers the Timberwolves for the Star Tribune. It's had a tiny bit of downtime, although, with the hiring of a new president of basketball operations this offseason, I imagine that kind of cut into the feeling of, downtime. Probably get a little bit more this summer. But Chris, my goodness, the draft is a week away. Free agency starts, the week after that, essentially, when they can start negotiating and then actually announcing these things officially in early July. So a lot of things kind of swirling for the Wolves right now that I wanted to pick your brain on. First and foremost being the man who's going to be charged with making a lot of these decisions, or at least being, the voice and face behind these decisions, Tim Connelly, their new president of basketball operations. You've had a chance to talk with him a couple times now, both at the press conference setting and I believe in a sit down kind of setting as well. As you have gone through those processes, what maybe stands out to you from just how he thinks, how he operates, and whether that gives us any insight into what they might be thinking in a pretty big off season?
Yeah, I think the thing that's struck me at least a little bit in the press conference, and then when I chatted with him about a week or so ago, was he seems very collaborative in his decision making. Wants to get a lot of different voices involved, isn't afraid to say he doesn't have all the answers, and doesn't really try to fake you into thinking he's some sort of all-knowing basketball guru or something like that. So I think that's kind of the approach he wants to take with this front office that he's building, and kind of just getting a lot of different voices in the room. Everybody argues it out, and then, as he says, when they open the door again, it's a united front and a we kind of decision. I think previous basketball presidents of operations, Gerson Rosas, they always projected, a very confident front, and not to say Tim Connelly isn't, but he's not afraid to say that he doesn't necessarily have all the answers, and that's why he's building the staff that he has and wants to take their advice. So I think that's the one thing that stood out to me, is that he's a little self-deprecating. There was a lot of humility, I think, in some of his comments in that way.
Okay.
So that's what stood out to me.
Is he going to tell you? Did he tell you guys who they're going to draft?
Yes, he did. I'm just keeping it a secret from everybody. So
swore you to secrecy.
Yeah. So as for the draft, when I asked them about that, there's always the eternal question of, do you draft the best player available, or do you draft for need first and foremost? And these guys tend to say that they're all best player available kind of guys, and Tim Connelly is no different. That's also what he said as well. So I think if you're trying to pigeonhole what they might need out of this roster next season, they're not going to get it with the 19th pick in the draft. I don't think you're looking to fill a need for the next season. And Connolly's thinking is, well, look, rosters change very dramatically and very quickly in the NBA. So what you need one off season isn't necessarily what you're going to need the next off season. So when you have somebody that's going to be here for 4+ years, you can't really try to zero in on a need that you're going to have, or that you just need for one season. And that's kind of his thinking. And he said that some of the mistakes he's made is when he's tried to focus too much on need for a specific year. And then all of a sudden the landscape of your team changes, the outlook of it changes, and then that player doesn't fit anymore, and they're not as needed as they once were.
Yeah, I think that's smart. I mean, I think most teams, if they were being completely honest, probably draft sometimes with a blend of those two ideas. If there's kind of a tiebreaker, or if they see two people who they think the same of roughly, and one seems like a better near-term roster fit, and there's not like a big question of upside or anything like that, I think, it makes some sense to draft in that direction, so you avoid some, redundancies on your roster and don't have to, create roster turmoil by then being like, well, now we have 5 wings, or now we have 4 point guards. What are we going to do? Kind of stuff. But yeah, I think that's a good approach in general. And they have 4 picks, that 19 pick being their first round pick, but they have 3 second round picks. So a lot of different things they can do, a lot of different ways they can go. And one thing, I think you and I have already talked about this maybe once on the show, but one thing that Denver under Connelly was generally good at was getting value in the draft, not just, hitting on lottery picks, but, like obviously the biggest example is Nikola Jokic, who is a second round pick. I don't think you can expect to draft a 2-time league MVP in the second round more than once a decade or so. Probably not even that often, but he does seem to have a knack, and whether that's him or whether that's the collaborative approach of getting some value out of the draft. So it'd be interesting to see what they do and how they kind of use the kind of assets available to them.
Yeah, and I think you have the ability to package those, move around the board a little bit if you want, try to get some assets for down the road as well. If you're not going to be, using all these picks this season, and they're not going to have enough, they're going to have enough roster spots to draft 4 guys and stash them on the roster. So it's G League is always a possibility. International players that you could stash are possibilities, in that portion of the draft. But there's a lot of options that they could do with those picks, and we'll see how they choose to use those assets moving forward.
It does seem like the value of a second round pick has maybe increased in recent years. It almost seemed like they used to be a throwaway. I mean, the Wolves used to just kind of, I don't know, it didn't seem like they even really cared about the second round, and not in the last 5 years, but, taking 15, 20 years ago, a second round pick in the NBA was generally not really a big priority. And now it's still a crapshoot. Does it seem to you like those picks have more value now that teams are really, seeing that they can turn those into productive rotation players if they do their homework?
I think so. I don't know if they've gained or lost value. I think it just depends on where you're at as a team. If you have the room to let guys develop, the second round picks could be very valuable because you could sign guys for relatively cheap to longer deals or what have you. If you have a long enough, if you're trying to build a contender, though, second round picks become just fodder for trying to bolster your roster with maybe more veteran talent, through trades or whatnot. So I just think it depends on where you're at as a team, how valuable they are.
We don't know exactly where the Wolves are as a team right now, but you did mention the word trade. That was on my list. D'Angelo Russell. And, this will be the talker for however long it is the talker until there's some sort of resolution to this. A lot of, NBA national people kind of talking about D'Angelo Russell being available in a trade, kind of like it's just common knowledge. I think the latest was in the Ringer earlier this week as part of their draft preview, suggesting the Wolves might take, I think, the guard from Kentucky, Washington, and maybe that could be a part of moving on from D'Angelo Russell, who they say they are shopping. And Russell tweeted something about shopping along the way in there too, then deleted it quickly. Just the cryptic cat and mouse game that tends to happen during rumor season. As you see it from, you've covered this team for several years now. You've covered the entirety of the Russell era, but now there's a new person in charge. How do you think that situation ends up getting itself played out?
Tough to tell.
Yeah.
I always say this. I always say this when it comes to trades because, I think what happens in social media when it comes to trying to design trades and what actually happens behind closed doors when you see finished trades come is usually a very different thing. It's so hard to come up with trade constructs that actually happen in the real world. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So it's just hard to tell. It's always hard to tell what a player's true value is, to me at least, who's interested and who might want him. You could look around the league and say, well, this team looks like they could use him. This team looks like they could use him, but they may not have any interest at all. For him.
Yeah.
So, I just think this is me personally, saying that I think you saw in the playoffs that maybe Russell just isn't the best fit for this roster. I wrote that as much after the season was over. So I think with an expiring deal, you always, if you're not going to be signing somebody long term, you try to figure, especially with that much money involved, you try to see what you might be able to get in return. They have a lot of flexibility in the cap coming up after next year as well. You don't want to really give that up either. So, it's just we're just have to see it play out. It's just, I hate to say that, but it's just too hard to handicap and predict where trade negotiations might go.
I wonder if, this is a case where the decision maker makes a difference just because, Gerson Rosas, who was let go, less than a year ago, not so much for basketball decision-making reasons as for other things. The D'Angelo Russell trade was the signature move of the Rosas era. That was the big trade he made. Obviously, he made some draft picks, drafted Anthony Edwards, things like that. But, as far as trades go, that was the signature move he made. And so I wonder sometimes, when a decision maker at the top makes a big splash move like that, they become kind of beholden to seeing it through with that player instead of saying, you know what, we're going to cut our losses here, or this maybe didn't work the way we wanted it to. And maybe, Tim Connelly coming in maybe has a different perspective on things and is not attached to Russell the same way that Rosas might have been.
Oh, 100%. And that's why I think, you might be seeing some of these rumors out there is, Tim Connelly's coming in with fresh eyes. He's, he's got a long leash to make decisions that are going to last a long time for this roster. And, as he said, it's, he's coming in here to try and take a team that's on an upward trajectory and not mess it up. And so you look at D'Angelo Russell, you look at what he did last year, and there were some very good moments last season, and he's still a starting point guard in the NBA who's going to command a high salary no matter where he ends up. But I think you just look at how he fits this current roster with with Anthony Edwards emerging and needing the ball a lot. Karl Anthony Towns, all NBA level player, needs the ball a lot. I think as we go forward here, it's where does D'Angelo Russell fit in, and is a more ball dominant point guard what you want, or is it somebody who's going to facilitate a little more and be kind of a more traditional point guard? And I think maybe that's where this roster is headed, or might be more suitable for this roster, as opposed to, somebody who's going to need the ball in their hands a lot and need to shoot a lot.
Yeah, I think the one caveat in all this is, beware when you want to wish someone out of town, because the player the Wolves traded to get D'Angelo Russell is, let's be honest, one really good finals game away from being in the finals MVP discussion, Andrew Wiggins. So let's got to bear that in mind as we think about, fits and who we want on this team and who we don't.
Yeah, exactly. And you never know how somebody is going to fit in a certain situation. That's part of the magic of being a decision maker in the NBA, is you have to forecast this better than the peanut gallery like you and me out there.
Now, we've seen a few different players potentially, mocked to the Timberwolves at 19. I think I mentioned Washington earlier, if maybe they can go with some size, some shooting. One guy they almost certainly won't be getting is Chet Holmgren, the former Minnehaha Academy standout, likely to be, if not the first overall pick, he will almost certainly be in the top 2 or 3, joining former teammate at Minnehaha, Jalen Suggs, as back-to-back top 5 picks. Both of them played, of course, at Gonzaga. Such a unique blend of shooting, height. He's rail thin, 7-footer, just it does so many things to affect the game on the court, but is also somewhat hard to translate exactly how it's all going to look in the NBA just because he is so slim. You are writing about Chet Holmgren for Sunday's papers. You've kind of looked at that. What do you make of his journey and the possibility of him being the first overall pick here on next Thursday?
Yeah, this is I think he's got a chance to be the next kind of unicorn big guy in the NBA. Karl Anthony Towns is one of them. Jokic, Embiid are the others, and Chet's got the skills to join that club. I think eventually, talking to people around him for the Sunday piece, they easily dismiss the concerns about his frame and the strength, which is obviously top of mind for anybody that is looking at him. I think that they're excited about the prospects of going number 1 and going to Orlando and playing with Jalen Suggs, but they don't want to get ahead of themselves. It's a long, complicated process, the NBA draft, and I all the mock drafts I've been seeing recently have him tending to go number 2 to Oklahoma City. So I'm not sure how much the Orlando thing might happen, but crazier things have happened, right?
Yeah, they have. It should be a fun draft night regardless. I mean, for Wolves fans, it's it's an opportunity. Last year they didn't have a pick at all last year, right? Because they traded the pick to Golden State. So it was kind of like one of those nights where you're just like sitting around like, well, I guess we'll watch what the other teams do. But they have 4 picks this year. Like you said, maybe not likely to use all 4, but I would guess they would keep a couple of them at least and see what happens there. Chris Hine, good stuff. We'll look forward to reading your Chet Holmgren piece on Sunday and everything leading up to the draft next week. And we'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good, Mike. Talk to you later.
Good stuff with Chris Hine. Didn't get a ton into the specifics of who the Wolves might draft. So I want to go to a piece that my colleague Jeff Day had on Star Tribune website Wednesday, should still be up today, kind of looking around at different mock drafts in the NBA and seeing kind of where things sit with who people think the Wolves might or should take. So there's 6 different players showing up, which, at number 19, not terribly surprising. It's not like when you're picking in the top 5 where there's probably only a range of 2 or 3 players you're probably looking at. But so here's what Jeff put together. One player, Walker Kessler. He's a center from Auburn. A big player, could help defensively. NCAA Defensive Player of the Year. That to me would be a pretty good addition. I've long thought that Karl-Anthony Towns could use somebody next to him who could be a defensive difference maker. For a while, Gorgui Dieng kind of filled that role if they were playing alongside each other, but not to the degree that that someone like Kessler could. So I like the idea of that pick and letting Towns play more power forward, frankly, which is probably a position he should be playing more often than not. That was from ESPN.com. The Ringer says Ty Washington from Kentucky. I think I noted this one earlier this week. They think he makes sense because D'Angelo Russell being, quote, shopped around. Like the idea of Washington and Karl-Anthony Towns in a pick and roll. So, there you have it. That's that would be an interesting pick too, especially if there is a D'Angelo Russell trade in the offing. Sports Illustrated likes Kennedy Chandler, guard from Tennessee. Athletic guard, I like that. Good pick and roll guys like that. So you can kind of see a trend forming here. People seeing needs for the Wolves being more at guard, or perhaps someone to help protect the rim with Towns. SB Nation likes Blake Wesley, Notre Dame guard. Good offensive player, can get his own shot, things like that. So it could be someone who maybe helps them on that side of things. NBA DraftNet likes Ousmane Dieng, guard/forward from France. They're saying he's the definition of a high ceiling, low floor prospect. The sky's the limit, but if taken too high, he can just as easily fall through the floorboards. The French wing surely passes the eye test, being a smooth point forward with nice size and length, having the ability to either score or create opportunities for his teammates. That's interesting to me, although I wonder if he'd be ready sooner rather than later. This is a team with I don't say not win now, but a team that has, expectations for next season. Don't know if you can wait forever for a prospect to come over and help, but that's an interesting name as well. Last one on the list from NBC Sports, E.J. Liddell, power forward from Ohio State, 6'7", blocked a lot of shots last season. I wonder if he blocks as many shots in the NBA at that height, but still, that's somebody who could help them as well. They need some defensive help, I think. That would be someone who has more upside on that end of the floor. To me, would be pretty interesting because Pat Beverly is here next year, but he's not going to be here forever. You need someone who has that mentality, who has that as kind of the first part of their basketball DNA, not necessarily the second part of their basketball DNA. So intrigued by the names that are maybe on the defensive end more than the offensive end, but all these names sound like guys, more or less that could help. It's kind of a blank slate. You don't get exactly who you want, but at 19, you are able to get a quality player. Sometimes someone who's productive can fall through the cracks, and that could be where the Wolves lined up this season with the draft. Let's finish with the cooler. It is finals season. NHL caught up to the NBA, finally got Game 1 underway last night in the finals. The Avalanche jumped out to a 3-1 lead after one. Tampa Bay comes back with 2 in the second. No scoring in the third, and then Colorado wins it in overtime on a goal by Burakovsky. Just his second of the playoffs, looks like. But that's a big, big win for Colorado, the home team in this series. Not devastating for the Lightning. They know how to win these games. They know how to come back in these series. But that's a pretty important win for Colorado. Darcy Kemper, by the way, gets the win for the Avs, former Wild goalie. So good start to the playoffs. Good start to the Stanley Cup Finals. There, I'll be watching that series with interest. NBA Finals could be over as soon as tonight. Golden State trying to finish things off in Boston. Still got a hunch this one goes 7. It's been that kind of series. Tough to close out a good team on their home court. But, the Warriors have that championship kind of instinct. Maybe that's overrated. I don't know. But it does seem like they have something in their kind of makeup that could find that extra gear. Steph Curry doesn't want this to go a Game 7. I'm sure they'd love to win. right now, doesn't matter what court it's on, doesn't matter if they'd be celebrating in front of their fans or not. Finish this thing off tonight, and a championship, again, like I said at the jump, that I did not think they had in them at the start of the year, but that would be a real credit to this organization if they were able to get it done again tonight. That will do it for the show today. Should be talking to Kent Youngblood on Friday's show. Got to talk Lynx and the start of the Gophers women's basketball summer offseason program with all of their talented young freshmen coming in to hopefully turn this program back in the direction they want it to go. Thanks for joining me here today. Back at it again on Friday.